Welcome, citizen, to episode 7, chapter 9 of The Mandalorian, here at the Imperial Interlude. With me is, as always, Rolf. Hello, Rolf.
Hi, Tim.
So, this one was a bit on the long side, though it feels short. Am I wrong to say that?
No, it was 40, just over
39 minutes.
Was it
just
39?
39.
So it was longer than last week's, but it's sort of I think that's probably the average time.
It's the average,
Yeah.
right in the middle. And as always, spoilers. Don't
Yes.
pass this point unless you have seen everything The Mandalorian until now. If not, go back. Choose wisely.
Or if you're still here, why?
Yeah. Hit
If you haven't
pause,
seen
watch
it.
The Mandalorian, come back, enjoy.
Definitely. But it opened quite quickly, actually, didn't it?
Yeah, and before we go into the story, did you recognize the security droid?
It was the same as I thought it was a K2SO, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it's the same model as in the first season with a prison
Yes.
ship.
Yeah, it was the same. It was the prison ship one, definitely. It was the same model, but it was a different color.
It looks darn similar to the KX series, which is the K2SO. It's got the same joints on legs and arms. It even got the same shoulder pads. So it's basically the torso has been modified a bit and it's got a different head.
Yeah,
other than that, it's more or less the same.
I thought it was because it was just the way that it was moving. The way that it was walking just did remind me of K2SO. You know, from the way that
maybe they
they
saved money on animation simply by using the K2SO animation and plonking on a similar exterior on it, because those are CGI, obviously.
Yeah, they're not practical. I don't think they could afford. Well, they probably could afford to do the practical effect like what they did with Alan Tudyk, but they've got I'm guessing with them having the digital model and the digital mapping from what he did in Rogue One, that it's easy enough to move through. But yeah, it was definitely. It sort of opened really quickly as well. There was a little bit of sort of the previously on the Mando, but it was more. It didn't really cover last episode, did it? It was more
only in the last shot where the Mandalorian was with the Ranger of the New Republic.
Yes,
that was the only throwback to the last episode, I think.
And that's who we get to see first. Well, we get to see Bill Burr turn up again as Mayfield first, don't we? Cutting up a
TIE fighter.
TIE fighter. But there was I think as well, there was a TIE fighter in the background. Well, there was all sorts in the background. But I think I also saw a Jedi fighter, a bit like what we saw Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi use in Rogue One. Not Rogue One, in Revenge of the Sith, the ball with the wings.
Yeah, I didn't saw those, but at the second largest shot of the landscape, there was the backside of a U-wing. I'm pretty sure of that. And I'm guessing if we were to examine this short snippet of him working on this junkyard planet, we would make out some nice little gadgets and things, but I, for my part today, couldn't be asked to look.
No. The planet did remind me of the planet in the beginning of Fallen Order.
Yeah, it's
the junk planet sort of thing, the big recycling planet.
Which always strikes me as a bit weird, having this technology advanced races and still having manual labor to disassemble broken ships.
It was, but I think it was just, it's the hard labor thing, isn't it? Where they were trying to get across. I think that
I'm always thinking there are possible small, very expensive, hard to manufacture pieces in this that are best removed manually before the rest simply gets molten down,
melted and reused in other ships.
Yeah, some crystals or gauges or anything that may not be handled good via the means of droids.
Yeah, and then we sort of cut to Bill Burr being approached by the droid that we mentioned.
Yeah.
Or Mayfield. Sorry, I'll call him Mayfield, even though it's probably easier to say Bill Burr.
Well, his name is Mix Mayfield, played by Bill Burr.
Bill Burr. Yes. But yeah, and then we get our shot of Cara Dune
Yes,
turning
taking
up,
him along for a ride.
taking him for taking him for a ride indeed. Especially I quite liked as she gets him to follow him. And he goes, "Where am I going? Where am I going?" And you see
It would
he
be
can't see it.
modern courtesy to tell me where we're going.
Yeah,
And
and of
the
course,
security droid did a nice one, which I don't know if this was an intentional reference to RoboCop, but
well,
I've
you've got
immediately
3 seconds to
you
comply.
got 3 seconds to comply. Three.
Yeah. And then, of course, he can't see where they're going, and Kara knows where they're going, and the camera pans up, and you get the shot of Slave One,
In the
sort of
background.
in the background. And then, of course, as they approach Slave One, he sort of steps and looks up, and there's a shock on his face, and then you look, and it's Boba in brand new armor, well, his old armor repainted, which
Well,
looked amazing,
which
actually.
was a genuinely nice sight to be seen. I actually was afraid they would keep him in this beaten up armor, but this looked so cool. Brand spanking new LED lights blinking on his chest.
Yeah. Did you notice the change as well that they made with the Boba?
I noticed they didn't remove the dent in his helmet. That's still
No,
there.
it was the color. The backpack was green as well, but in the original sort of
Or
shots
reddish
of it,
brown.
it's blue with the reddish with the orange on it.
Yeah.
So that he's completely repainted the whole lot. Sort of in that Mandalorian green, should we call it? And it did. It looked really impressive, and he was holding his E3 blaster, which was nice to see as well.
Yeah.
And then he says, and then Mayfield goes, "Oh, and I thought you were someone else." And his Boba steps to one side. Down comes the
Yeah.
Mandalorian with his
Oh
face
shit!
changes.
I'm in trouble now. There too.
So,
And the first thing
it,
that comes to his mind is, "Oh, you're going to kill me now, are you?"
but then we get the sort of the exposition as they all board the ship and the ship takes off, which is really cool seeing the inside of Slave One
Yeah,
because
and
we've never actually seen.
that's what was one of my first thoughts exactly when you've seen the background rotating as the ship goes from vertical to horizontal movement.
Yeah, it's the first time we've actually seen anything like that. So it shows that that glass plate or the cockpit glass front must run quite a way down the ship as well because they were looking out.
Either that or there's some kind of monitor.
Yeah, some sort of digital display. But then you get the exposition of why they've acquired him, shall we say, which is they want the coordinates to Moff Gideon's ship, and of course Mayfield laughs, and then he makes up this. Then he says that there may be a way of locating him on a planet. I think was pretty much what they were alluding to, wasn't he? That
Yeah,
there was like that he
he,
needs access to an Imperial terminal.
he needs to use an internal terminal, so something that's more akin to a internal computer connected to a local area network in current times. I'd say nothing that is logging in from the outside.
Mhm.
And
And
he
then
knows of one on a desolate planet somewhere nobody has ever heard before, and the Mandalorian simply goes, "There's nothing there on this planet."
and then we get the hollow when I think when they before they reach the planet or when they reach the planet. No, it was before they reach the planet. They get the hollow, don't they, of the refinery or whatever it was
Yeah,
that they head to.
Boba Fett does a scan just before they arrive, and they see the refinery, which
Yeah.
is looking a bit like a water dam
Mhm.
generating something.
Yeah, some sort of ore, but I'm trying to figure out where try and read what it is quickly here. But then they land, and then you get the exposition of from Mayfield saying that he'll need to go by himself. Um, because it needs to scan his basically to have a facial scan
Yeah,
to get
and
the data and things like that, and then it runs through all of the then all the others he asks then Cara says, "I'll go," and then he says, "Yeah, I'm not going in with a dropper, Republic dropper." And then it's then turn to Fennec Shan and says, "Well, I'm wanted by the ISB
Yeah,
because of find out that it's been
we should
controlled by."
say beforehand that they can't join because the base is scanning their genetic code, and that's if that catches on some list that is not as friendly, there
Yeah,
would be guards all over the place.
and it's also been controlled by the Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB,
Yeah.
as well. Then then Mando turns to Boba, which I thought was
Yes.
so funny. I think they'd recognise my face.
Which was hilarious if you start to think about clones and
It was like,
okay.
yes, I think they probably would. And then the Mando scans the vehicles as they're going in because he can see one of the big heavy trucks. And of course, he goes, right, I'll go. And then we cut to the whole Cara Dune beating up some stormtroopers, some tankers, because it was the same armor as the tank trooper from Rogue One.
And let
It's
me
nice
just
to see
say,
that
I can't understand why the Imperium uses wheeled vehicles for transportation of a volatile substance if they've got access to hovercraft. What's wrong with them? Why? Other than for plot, there's no reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is the whole plot device thing, isn't it? Really. But there's two films that this whole sequence with the trucks is sort of one of them was an original 1953 French film called Wages of Fear. And what it is there's a bunch of like French Foreign Legion stuff take this very dangerous job in the outskirts of this village.
Wasn't that the movie about them transporting liquid nitroglycerin?
Yes. It was the later one was the US version, which was called Sorcerer with Roy Schneider. Exactly the same thing. They're basically taking nitro across the South American jungle. This sequence that they did with the trucks was very much like that. Was very in the similar sort of structure of they have this volatile stuff on the back of the truck that they have to get from A to B. And it was very, very, very similar in the way that was done, which I thought was really good. It was a nice way of sort of it's a nice what's the word, sort of film nod, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's but still, those films are made in a time where there is no hover, where there is no repulsor technology. Oh, well, let's just. I just wanted to get that off my chest because that was annoying me unbelievably, especially since when they capture these one of these trucks and the Mandalorian disguises himself as a stormtrooper and they get out the other end of the tunnel, there's an ambush by sort of pirates on hover vehicles.
Yes, they had hover vehicles, but the Empire are using big 8-wheel trucks. But it was quite interesting that the whole thing of him putting on that suit as well, which I thought was like, it's getting to the point where we can see him. I think this is one of the pinnacle episodes for that.
Yeah, his strong religious or pseudo-religious beliefs are starting to break up because he has a greater goal in mind.
And the child seems to be that.
Yeah,
that is what it is.
And it even gets worse later in this episode.
Yes. Yeah. But of course, as you alluded, they go through. Mayfield takes his helmet off because he can't see through it, and then he makes some jokes about how can you see through this thing and all of that.
Yeah, and I really like the way Mayfield was bitching about the fact that the previous owner of his suit was sweating, and the gloves are still wet, and this is so unpleasant. And then the Mandalorian comes around. Okay, this site is worth the price of admission.
Yes. So then we get the obligatory driving through the the conversation before the attack. But it's interesting that started to flesh out some of Mayfield's thought, because in the first episode we meet him in, which is the prison episode, we think he is just this, this one-dimensional hired gun. Yeah,
He's a bad guy. He shoots people for a living, and he's an
exactly.
ex-Imperial, making him unlikable right from the beginning.
But this started to flesh him out more, where there's more layers to him.
Yeah.
That he does the whole line, as long as he compares the Republic and the Empire and things like that, and and his motivations, and he basically turns around and says, like, if you can sleep well at night, that's that's all you need to really care about, in so many words. But then, of course, we get the pirate attack on hovered vehicles.
Yeah, at first we get the radio chatter from the other trucks that are calling in for help, and some explosions. And then we have, after, I think, 2 trucks exploded just before them.
One explosion, I think, was Saw. I think it was only one, but there was 2 attacks, I think.
Yeah.
But no, we see a destroyed truck. We don't see the explosion. We see a destroyed truck, and then it goes through the villagers, and you get that, the villagers sort of looking on at them.
Yeah. After 2 others have called in for help and are being destroyed, obviously, then there's the attack on the current objective, that is Mandalorian and Mayfield.
And then we get the obligatory fighting on top of the truck and all of that. And then just when all hope sort of lost after the fight, as more of them come, so he wipes out one of the hover vehicles, and then it's 2 more, or is it 2 follow them? He wipes them.
At first it's 1, he shoots them dead, then there are suddenly 2 more. There's an exponential growth somehow.
Yes, and then the final one's like a 5 or it looks like 5 or 6, where they're all holding thermal detonators, which I thought was great. And it was all choreographed as well, which I thought was quite funny, where they all press the buttons at the same time.
The weird thing that struck me was, this is the first time I think I've ever seen in a Star Wars movie or a series where a blaster is out of ammunition. He sits there, shoots 4 or 3 guys, and suddenly his blaster is empty, and he has to use his close combat skills to knock people off this train, the truck, left, right, and center, just like in any old Western movie.
Yeah, he throws his gun, and then he picks one of the spears up as well, doesn't he? Which I thought was quite...
Yeah, and he gets reminded, but rather painfully, that he's not wearing his Mandalorian armor when he's blocking one of the attacks, and his armor is shattered.
Yeah, and then we get, just as we think all hope is sort of lost, and basically lots of explosions either side, and it's 2 TIE fighters coming out of basically nowhere to save them because they're near the base, and we get the whole Mayfield going, "Aren't you glad to see TIE fighters?" That'll be the first time you're actually glad to see TIE fighters
and stormtroopers.
And we get, and that was the interesting one. And I've seen a couple of people sort of online when they've done reviews of it as well, and say this as well, as this is sort of the...
Oh, you're gone.
That we... Oh, I think I just cut out there.
You just cut out, and your mic went a bit haywire.
Right.
That's
Technology
better.
isn't it wonderful? So it was... I've seen this on sort of online and stuff, was in reviews, and where people have talked about the episode as well, where this is the first time we see this sort of thing from the Empire. Them cheering and greeting, and almost like putting a human face on them.
Yeah, basically making most of the Empire soldiers human beings, in a way that they fight for something, even though it's the wrong cause from our perspective, or the perspective of the rebels. But most of them are still ordinary people, which is even pushed further if you look at the scene when they arrive in the base, where there are miners that clearly look like they've been working all day underground, and you have a mixture of stormtroopers, and you have very nice bright, shiny stormtroopers, and some of them look like the rancid ones from the first season. So
Yeah.
they try to still hold up to the standards, but you can see there is a sort of degradation within this whole system.
Yeah, that yeah, you know, that they're out on the fringes. And it was the what you call it as well, and then you had, like you were saying, you had the different quality in stormtroopers, but then you had the Imperial, the like the ISB or the Imperial officers, because they're not actually said who they are. They're in their pristine, they're in their pristine ironed, you know,
Yeah,
I'm an
that's.
officer sort of thing, you know,
Though
type of
there
thing.
was one in the hall when they arrived, which looked like he didn't fit into his uniform. The
Mm.
his cap was a bit too far.
Yeah. And then Mayfield go to the terminal and turns right the way round as they disembarked and walks through this throng of Imperials, and walks back to the Mando and says, "We'll have to leave because a former commanding officer of his is there in the canteen." But and then they have a conversation. He goes, "No, I'm not going in. He might recognize me." And Mando grabs the com, like the ID chip,
Mm.
or the data chip, and then slowly walks in as he's being watched by this officer and his companion, because there's sort of the two officers there. And then he goes up to the terminal, and then the terminal scans him, but he's
Yeah,
got his
and
helmet on.
before we go on further, we should mention that Mayfield tells the Mandalorian you need to show your
Yeah,
face in order to use this device. And he goes up still wearing his helmet, and basically at that point we know it can only go two ways. Either he's raising an alarm or he's taking off his helmet.
yeah, and he does the
Yes.
taking off the helmet, which
And
just shoot
shortly after that, they get called out by this officer, this ex-officer
exactly.
of Mayfield, because he was behaving too weirdly.
Exactly. Now, what's interesting is the gentleman who played the officer, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
played the Night King in Game of Thrones. He was the leader of the Army of the Dead in the last season of Game of Thrones. It's the same actor.
Well, that's a
It was like,
recurring theme, obviously, for him.
yeah, yes, indeed.
I only
Um,
play roles where I lead legions of undead.
yes, or legions of stormtroopers. But yeah, they have a shall we say a bit of a banter, and then the officer turns around and goes, "Are you the troopers that brought in the
The shipment of
the shipment?" And you go, "Yes," and then he takes them for a drink, and then they they start having, basically, this officer and Mayfield having a conversation
yeah,
where this is, I think, where the title of the episode comes from,
the believer.
the believer, because you've got this officer on one side who is a true believer, is, I would say, one of the fanatics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and let me
it's
just
probably the
say,
best way.
um, as a non-English speaker, the dialect, the tongue he uses, it struck me awfully as American, even Texan, sort.
Yes, it was very Texan. I thought that as well. Being the English speaker, shall we say, native English speaker, it was very Texas. It was very, what it reminded me of a bit as well was that southern, sort of that Confederate.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I was actually waiting for him to say was something along the lines of "Then the South will rise again,"
Yes,
which he
exactly. Because
basically does when he says, "And they will await us with open arms."
yes, that was it. But what was interesting as well is they brought in Operation Cinder,
Yes,
which is from Battlefront 2, the single player campaign of Battlefront 2. Which is basically, for people who don't know, it's the final sort of edict from the Emperor, if he was ever defeated, was Operation Cinder, which was to basically wipe out planets,
kill
to
all,
burn
leave
everything
nothing
to the ground.
alive.
Yeah, leave nothing. It's a bit like in Babylon 5, the one that they did in sort of this final season of that, where the Earth president did the same thing, which was aim these big satellite laser beams at Earth and vaporize Earth to stop anybody from getting it.
Yeah,
And
and
as they're
Mayfield
reciting,
and this officer get into a debate on was it worth it, all those dead
yes.
people, and I think I was a bit surprised of the sudden ending of this discussion.
Well, did you not notice where Din or the Mandalorian nodded at him or shook his head to say, don't go there."
Yeah, I saw that. Nonetheless, I was a bit surprised that it actually took this turn when Mayfield simply drew his gun and shot the officer right there in front of
Yes.
everybody. And
Mm.
there's a point where I felt really, really bad for that poor shore trooper just coming back from the shift, wanting something to drink and to eat, maybe take a nap, watching his superior getting shot and then getting shot right after him.
Yeah, it was the whole the paw. It was the typical sort of thing. Is like boom, blast, guy
Can
dies,
my day
and
get any
everybody
worse? Yes, it can.
pauses. Yeah, everybody just pauses, doesn't it? It was like this sudden shot, and then Mayfield just leans and shoots
I think
shoots him, shoots the other one.
stare and stop in disbelief is the proper way to describe it. People
Yeah,
are completely baffled by what just happened.
but there was that nice ratcheting up to that point as well, wasn't there? With the way the dialogue was structured for
Yeah,
that Imperial officer, where Mayfield only talked at the beginning, and it was this officer's attitude and the ratcheting up of his rhetoric, I think, and his beliefs
yeah,
that
and
just pushed Mayfield over. Because Mayfield, as we know, is an ex-Imperial, but it's not said how he's an ex-Imperial, and I get the implication from that he probably deserted.
yeah, it could very well be that he survived this operation and
Mhm.
was
Played dead.
presumed dead and then simply left the planet to get on with his life. And I think, um, judging by what we have seen and heard from him before with the quote, everybody needs some sleep, or
Mhm.
just do what you need to do as long as you can sleep, it's all
Yeah,
going to be fine. And I think if that officer would have said something along those lines, yeah, I had to make this decision, I don't like it, I wouldn't make it again, but it's still a hard one. But he gloats of having sent people in the thousands to their deaths, and that's something he doesn't lose any sleep over it.
yeah,
I think at that point, Mayfield decides, okay, this one is a lost cause. We can simply shoot him.
yeah. And then we get the Din helping him as well, and then Mayfield hands him his helmet, which I thought was a nice touch, saying,
I
"Nobody
never
saw your
saw your
face."
face, and nobody can prove otherwise because everybody who was at that point is dead.
Hmm. Yeah, and then we get the escape, which was in the meantime, Fen and Kara had gone to a sniper position
Yes.
to overlook, um, and as the two Mayfield and the Mandalorian sort of kick out a window to go onto the ledge. Um, Fennec Shan goes on to the comms to tell Fett to start his run so he can pick them up, because the idea, which we forgot to mention, was at the beginning was Fett would go to the ship
Yeah.
and pick
They
them up,
would,
and they would escape on the roof.
as soon as they would have the information, they would somehow get to the roof, and Fed would pick them up from there, and the two sharpshooter ladies would snipe off any anti-aircraft gun that it
Mhm.
would be there.
And then, of course, we get them doing the sharpshooter bit as the Mandalorian and
Mayfield.
Mayfield begin to escape along the little ledge. I like the stormtrooper that tried to grab him by his leg and got shot and then kicked.
Yeah,
Which I do.
those stormtroopers in this episode really took a beating.
Yes, they did. They took a heavy beating, and as they're trying to escape, of course, stormtroopers come out the window and are getting shot left, right, and center from our two sniper people, which I thought was nice as well. It was nice to see that that they were given.
What surprised me a bit that nobody seems to have noticed that there were sharpshooters on the other side of the valley. They may have had one or two shoot at their direction just for completeness, but no, we are just focusing on those two who are trying to escape, and we don't wonder why people
Yeah.
are dropping dead left, right, and center, even though those two are not shooting.
It was another one of those plot points,
Yeah. So
Um,
plot hole wise, this is one of the weaker ones. Nonetheless, it was a rather interesting.
it was an interesting episode, definitely. And then, of course, they get on the roof as Fett flies over, which was really nice to see Slave One doing its thing.
Yeah.
And then they jump in. I was expecting, and this was probably just the cynic in me and thinking about, Mayfield has done the thing. He's killed the officer. He's going to jump into the Fett ship. As he jumped, I thought he's going to get shot.
Yeah, I thought something similar. I thought he would miss the ramp and or slip and fall to
Yeah,
his death.
yeah, I was expecting, but it didn't happen, which was a
Yes.
nice surprise.
Which is always nice if they don't succumb to tropes.
Yeah, and then as they pull up and away before they get pursued, Mayfield asks the Mandalorian to
Hand me the
pass him
sniper
the
rifle.
basically the slug thrower that Fett was using, because it was a slug thrower, it wasn't a blaster, and he sights down the barrel and looks at where previously on their way in the pirates had tried to plant a bomb or a thermal detonator into the
Yeah,
the
there were
shipment, the volatile stuff.
two trucks standing, and one has its hatch open, exposing the canisters of this very volatile, dangerous substance.
Mhm. So Mayfield sights down and fires and
And
blows
then
it up along
everything
with
goes kaboom.
definitely everything goes kaboom. And Fennec turns to Cara and goes, "Nice shot."
Yeah.
And then we get the as some people have said on the internet, and it is cool, but it's like, no, it's not the best sound effect ever in Star Wars, which is as the slave ones pulling away or getting away, two TIE fighters follow him, and we get the sonic mine that was
Yeah,
dropped in
seismic
episode
charge.
2, the seismic charge. So we get that silence,
And
and as it
then going
explodes, it's like
bazong. It is a cool sound. You've got to
it
give
is
him
very
that.
it is very cool.
Have you noticed that the effects guys have really gone out of their way when it comes to the TIE fighters and smoke?
Yeah, it's I think they've just upped their game
They when
generally.
the TIE fighters initially appeared defending the truck, they went
Mhm.
through a big cloud of smoke, and when going on pursuit with Slave One, they went through a cloud of smoke, and both times they added this effect of turbulence. That bloody thing has a name. I can't remember now what it is. Whereas on the tip of the wings, there's air starts to circle, and that leads to a very specific pattern in smoke and clouds. And I think adding that really pushed the level of immersion for yes, those are actually flying there. They're not just slapped on effects.
Hmm. And then we get to the sort of the final sequence of it where Fennec and Kara come through the jungle to a landed Slave One, and we get Mayfield, Mando, and Kara sort of talking, and Kara goes, "It's a shame that."
Yeah, well, at first, Mayfield is okay now back to the mines or back to the
Yeah.
scrapyard. He has somehow accepted his fate as being back to prison, and I think Kara says also something along those lines, like, "I saw your impressive shooting," and
I
at that
think so.
point, I think she decided, okay, he's gone beyond what has been asked of him, and maybe even had some talk with Mandalorian beforehand on comms, and has
Yeah.
decided to let him die.
Let him die figuratively.
Well, we
So
don't know
yes,
what will
so
become of him.
we don't.
He doesn't have any
But yes,
funds, he doesn't have any weapons, and he's on a planet where he's just been identified as Imperial.
I've got a suspicion he could probably get off that planet.
Oh, I'm pretty sure he will, and maybe even show up again later in the series.
I think he may become a recurring character, because they as we've sort of alluded, is Kara basically goes, it's a shame Mayfield died during that, and that's the story she's going to stick with basically to tell her superiors.
After all,
And
she's still a marshal, and marshals
yeah,
live in the wild, wild west where law is made by those who are in power.
and then we get, as they board and Mayfield walks off into the jungle or the forest, we get the final stinger of sorts, which was Moff Gideon's crews are getting a communication.
Yes, and basically what he gets is a one-to-one repeat of his own with his own what is it called again?
Words.
Of
It's
his
his
own
own
words.
monologue.
This monologue, this speech he has given to the Mandalorian regarding the child, with the emphasis on the phrase "you don't know what what he means to me."
So basically, the Mandalorian throws Moff Gideon's words back at him that he used at the end of the first season, where he goes, you know, the child meals to me, or what, you have something that I want.
Yeah.
You know, all it needed was, I will fight. You know, the line from
I don't know
Taken.
who you are or you are, but I will find you
I
and I
have
will
a
kill
yes.
you.
I have a series of specialist skills.
Maybe that would have been a bit too far, even though the actor is also related to Star Wars.
Yes, that would have been a little bit on the nose, having Liam Neeson's words sort
Yeah.
of.
Though it would have been, I wouldn't have put it past them.
No, it was a good episode. It was, and it wasn't a filler, but it was sort of heading to this week coming, which we know is the final
Yeah.
episode in this season.
I think this episode can be described. This is the bottom part of the roller coaster ride, and it's just ramping up back up now. Because
Yeah, it's just
with threatening a imperial general, that's you don't do this lightly.
no. So now we just need to figure out who are we going to see next week. Is going to be the main thing. Is, are we going to see a return of Bo-Katan?
I
don't know.
Don't know.
I've got a
Maybe as a some sort of cavalry emerging in the time of need or something.
Yeah.
I'm completely lost on how they are trying to do this, because even with the help of Kara and the other Mandalorians, I think a straight-on ambush on a Imperial warship would be suicide.
Yeah,
So I'm
probably.
guessing they are trying a more stealthy, sneaky approach.
Yeah, I think that remember, as well as Slave, we know Slave One is quite a decent ship, so I think it has stealth and things capabilities. So
silent running modes should be an option. Maybe Kara gets on and distracts the whole crew in order to get back the Darksaber.
Yeah,
making some sort of dual invitation to Moff Gideon.
I think we're going to get that with the Beskar spear, because you wouldn't have. I don't think they would have put the Beskar spear and shown it in action with Ahsoka if it wasn't going to be used again.
Yeah, probably.
And for him to find it in the rubble, I think was a little bit too much.
Though he didn't use it with Ahsoka in battle. With Ahsoka,
no, what
he
I
had
mean
just his own armor. The spear was in battle with.
It was Ahsoka.
Yeah,
Magistrate had the spear.
Magistrate, not the Mandalorian. I forgot that scene.
And Ahsoka gave him the spear, and then he recovered it from the rubble of the Razor Crests. So I think we will see possibly him using the spear.
And if that happens, we will also see him using this little knob he saved from the wreckage for the child.
Yeah. Yes. But it was definitely a good episode, and it's now we're in the home straight.
I'm going to on record now saying he won't liberate the child in the last episode of the season. That will be the big cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think we are heading to a cliffhanger, because I think they've sort of hinted that they're looking at 4 seasons of the Mandalorian.
Even if they go only with the next season, so the season 3 has been confirmed. I'm guessing we still would need a giant, I almost said hangover, cliffhanger to get people stay on target.
Definitely. But
So
I think that's it for the episode.
this is there wasn't much content as is in it because there's mostly fighting, shooting, and for the Imperial part dying.
Yes.
So what's your verdict on this episode?
I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this entire season, to be honest. You know, there's been quiet episodes, or there's been episodes that weren't, that you don't think were busy, shall we say,
Yes.
in the way that they were done. This probably ranks like one of them, even though there was action in it. It was more. I think the story of this one was more dealing with Mayfield. I think it was a little bit of shall we say character building on his character
Yeah,
to flesh him
the
out a bit
story
more.
focus was more or less a straight line. We need
Mhm.
to get the information on where Moff Gideon is, which was basically a travel from point A to point B from the last episode, and the main focus was actually on the character that is Mayfield and his
Yeah,
relationship to the Empire and his former comrades.
yeah, which I thought was good, and it fleshes the character out, and hopefully we'll see him again.
Yeah, and for some weird reason, it makes the Imperium uh, more real, for
Hmm.
lack of a
Yeah.
better word. It doesn't feel as much as a heartless machine, but more or less
Mhm.
uh, a construct that is at its core a heartless machine, but is surrounded by people who actually believe and think and feel what should be right in the universe. And
Hmm.
to be honest, the Imperial officer that got shot right at that desk, the ex
Hmm.
superior of Mayfield, had a point when he said people don't want justice or freedom, they want order. And giving our current situation with all this fuckery of COVID-19,
Yeah.
yeah, people do want order. Though the
Indeed.
price could be high at times.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know. It's people want the specific things, but yeah, it is, you know.
Be careful for what you wish for, is the thing
Yeah,
that comes to mind.
yeah. Try to keep away from the political ramifications of doing, shall we say, some political commentary on the parallels between that
Yeah.
and some other stuff. So you know, it's like no,
Also,
let's not go there.
we had this week the investors call from Disney,
Hmm.
where we learned a lot of things regarding Star Wars.
Definitely.
We will make some sort of extra episode on that. I
Hmm.
don't know when my time schedule will actually allow me to do that, but we're thinking on it. And I think I
Hmm.
need to read up on it beforehand as well to not be the
Yeah,
complete
because
buffoon and bamble along. It was a lot.
there was a lot of Star Wars announcements. I mean, there was a lot of announcements across the entire range of what Disney are planning. But there was a lot of Star Wars announcements made during that investors call,
Yeah, and
and
only I think two
it's
or three visual aids were given. The most thing was text, so we
there.
shall see.
There was some sizzle reels shown, but we didn't get to see them
Oh, yeah,
because when you
IGN has one for the Rogue Squadron movie that has been announced. I think
that
Bad
was
Batch
yeah,
was got something that somehow got out in the
yeah.
wild,
Mm.
but
No, they showed Bad Batch trailer, which is what the sizzle reel is. They showed an Andor behind the scenes one for Cassian Andor, and Patty Jenkins released that Twitter video that IGN have shown.
yeah,
That was on her Twitter feed. The ones that they did have stuff for but didn't show was there was some Kenobi stuff. That's when you got on the investors call, you got the black screen with the countdown, you know, coming back in 2 minutes, because it's only for the investors to see. You know, this
yeah,
it's a bit like the same way Comic Con works, you know, where you watch live streams, or not streams, but you watch YouTube videos, say videos of people put out from Comic Con, where they cut, you know, the trailers and stuff because they're specifically for the people in Hall H or whatever. So there was one for Kenobi, there was one for Lando as well, but we'll cover this in a
yeah.
separate video, I think, you know, because there was a lot to cover for Star Wars.
There needs to be notes taken.
Yes.
Lots of notes beforehand to not have a completely misunderstanding on what we're talking about.
Yep.
So with this being the 7th episode, I thank you, Ralph, for being here. I thank you, audience, for listening. Until next time, stay hydrated, remain indoors.